Well, I see that we have over 400 of the over 770 people that have signed up for this webinar already online. So I'm going to go ahead and get started so we can get to our presentations. Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. I'm Kathy Alm, honored to be the CEO of PATH International, and I'm very excited to have this opportunity to connect with you. I know each of you are being impacted by COVID-19 on several fronts. In addition to the center and work challenges, we all have family and friends that we are worried about. My hope for you today is that for the next 90 minutes, you can take a deep breath, feel connected to the over 400 people and potentially 760 people that are going to be on this webinar, and take in some solid information that you can take home with you. I'd like to start by getting a few demographics from all of you. Bret is opening a poll asking you to mark which position most directly describes yours. The second poll that Bret will open after the first poll is done will be a poll asking what time zone you are in. You will notice one of the time zones is international, since it's very possible we have been joined by some of our international members. One housekeeping item: with the exception of the presenters, everybody else is muted. Kind of couldn't figure out how to have a conversation with 700 people on the line. But you can send questions via the question or chat function. Bret Maceyak, PATH International Credentialing Manager, and I will monitor those questions. We may not be able to answer all of those questions here today, but we will answer what we can, and we will follow up on those we're not able to get to. Bret, do we have our first poll response? You're doing the zones.
Doing time zones, and then we'll go ahead and share the responses for both polls.
Okay, I'll keep going then. At our first town hall webinar last week, we did run into some technical difficulties. We talked to GoToWebinar, and they have assured us that they have addressed this. So hopefully it will all go smoothly today. So today is about taking services online. I want to give a special thank you to our three experts, Joann Benjamin, Stefani, Viktora, Zabala, and Meggan McQueeney, who've joined us today to share how they have stayed connected to their participants virtually, and the joys and the challenges. All right, sharing poll results. It looks like 51% of you are instructors, volunteers, 35% are program director or head instructor, 22% are a center administrator, 14% therapist, and 9% veteran service provider. Great spread. And time zones, almost 50% coming from the East Coast, or Eastern time zone, then we followed by Central time zone, Pacific time zone, Mountain time zone, and we do have international attendee. So welcome again. Thank you for filling out our poll so we have an idea who we're talking to. So topics today will include virtual lessons, programming, and online learning presented by Stefani, Viktora, Zabala. Stefani is the Director of Organizational Development at McCormick Research Institute, a PATH International Premier Accredited Center in St. Cloud, Florida. She is a PATH International Certified Advanced Therapeutic Writing Instructor with CTRI certification, Interactive Vaulting Instructor, and ESMHL. Stefani is currently leading a large team of instructors and centers on the Virtual Education Co-op, an initiative to provide an online platform of activities to all centers. Conducting virtual programming for veterans will be presented by Meggan McQueeney, President, COO of Pravart's Therapeutic Writing and Educational Center, a PATH International Premier Accredited Center in Harvard, Illinois. Meggan is a PATH International Certified Master with CTRI certification, the 2015 PATH International James Brady Professional Achievement Award recipient, PATH International Advanced Evaluator, Special Olympics Equestrian Coach, Special Olympics Sports Management Team, and USEF Bronze Para-Dressage Coach. And our final presenter today will be Joann Benjamin, presenting telehealth for PTs, OTs, and SLPs who incorporate horses into their treatment strategies. This concept of telehealth is also applicable to psychotherapy sessions. Joann is a physical therapist with a pediatric practice in the Los Angeles area. Her membership with NARA, now Path International, began 35 years ago. She's a founding and lifetime member of American Hypnotherapy Association, AHA, having served in many roles, and was the AHA Therapist of the Year in 2017. Today's webinar is worth 1.5 core requirement CEUs. On just a slightly different topic, Path International has been communicating about the various types of support we are offering members during this time. I wanted to mention them here in case you missed any of them. Reduction of certification maintenance fee by 50% for members through May. That includes all participating professional plus, and higher ed student members. Half price webinars through May 31st. Reduction in virtual conference fee to $150. We have extended TRI and CTRI transition until June 30th of 2021. Center membership renewal has been extended, the deadline through April 31st, and the late fee is waived. Extensions on certification process deadlines and validity of prerequisites as needed are being considered and given. Working with our state chairs, we have been encouraging them to set up Zoom networking meetings. Washington State already has one scheduled for this Friday. And we worked with the VA and WWP, Wounded Warrior Project. They have approved remote sessions for payment, which is particularly applicable for today's webinar. We have developed a COVID-19 bulletin, which we are sending whenever there is critical information pertinent to you. We're trying to balance this with not over communicating, since I know inboxes are filling up. If you missed any of the communications, you can find them on the front page of our website. Path International is pleased to be able to offer free education opportunities such as this webinar during our quarantine. If you have any ideas for something we might present or other types of support to help us get through this together, please email me. My email address is calm@pathintl.org. We hope you'll enjoy the presentation and that you'll be able to implement some of these creative ideas. I really encourage you to stay throughout all three presentations, as you will find applicable ideas from each speaker. And now it is my pleasure to turn it over to our first presenter, Stefani Viktora Zabala. Stefani, the webinar is yours.
Thank you, Kathy. Hello, everybody. Bret, I think we have a couple of polls to do now as well.
Yes, we do. So let me go to the number of people that are currently offering virtual programming and telehealth or telehealth.
Okay, so it looks like a large majority of those that are here are not currently offering a virtual lesson. So it's good information to have. I hope that we can provide a framework for people to get started with that.
And I will pause for just a moment to collect responses from everybody regarding their comfort level with taking their services online. And now the results from that poll.
All right, thank you. So it looks like everyone's feeling at least a gung-ho, or most people are feeling gung-ho with it's intimidating, but I want to try it out. Keep a hold of that mindset. Our instructors at McCormick jumped right into this and have done a phenomenal job in the last week, starting to deliver online lessons to our participants and our volunteers and our veterans. So keep a hold of that willingness to keep trying new things. I have just a short time with you all today, and I won't be able to cover all of the possibilities of offering virtual lessons, but I want to help establish a framework so that we can start viewing our centers as open for lessons and not that we are closed due to COVID-19. We want to help get back into the positive mindset of things and show that we are still able to offer the programs that we have. I get my screen shared here. Hold on. Okay, Bret, are we able to see that?
Yep, looks good. Go ahead.
Okay. All right, so today we're going to view our education delivery as a spectrum. So on one end, we're going to have the synchronous active learning environment. So this is going to be where we're providing a live education opportunity with our participants, usually via a web conferencing platform. On our other end, we have the passive, the asynchronous type of learning. This is where reaching out to them via social media, email, sending them newsletters, worksheets, other videos that are of importance to their education. We're going to focus mostly on the active and synchronous version today, but please remember that all education that you are working to deliver to your participants are valid and important, and don't stop doing those things. It's going to take this full spectrum in order to continue to educate our participants in the best way possible. And like with all lessons in the arena, we have to start with our lesson plan. So we're going to go through each steps of a lesson plan today and talk about it from the perspective of our centers, as well as what it looks like in the participant environment. We'll need to identify the resources that we have available to us. This looks a little different for many of us right now than it does during our typical sessions. So starting with technology, so identify what resources we have as far as technology. Do we have internet? Do our participants have internet? Are we able to obtain a web conferencing platform? One that I have been using has been Zoom. It's very widely accessible and available, and many participants are already using it for their school materials, so they may be familiar with it already. And there are a ton of free or affordable resources out there, so please do your research and find what might work the best for you. Some of us are facing lack of staff availability. And in the last webinar, Dana talked about asking for help. And you may have volunteers out there that have IT or education skills that you can assist. And they've all been anxious for the day that we say that they can come back and help us. So make today that day that they come back and help. Reach out to them, see how they can help get involved to reduce the workload on the existing staff. You can also talk to other centers in your area about a collaboration project. As Kathy mentioned, McCormick is working through a virtual education co-op project, which we're providing activities and lesson plans for centers around the world right now, and everyone can access it so that we all have interesting and engaging activities to provide to our participants. Horses are the big ones. Not all of us have access to our horses. The horses don't come and live in my duplex so I can do lessons, but that doesn't have to stop us. It is great if we can include the horse in a live stream video, but it doesn't have to be the case. So in the last week, McCormick offered probably a 50-50 ratio of online lessons that either the horse was involved and we did it from the barn, or we just stayed on the computer and worked on a horsemanship activity. So this does not have to be a limiting factor if your horses are not accessible. We need to get everything set up. So as you've gone through your list of all of the resources, make sure that everything's lined up so that you're set to start your lesson. You need your lesson plans, you need how you're going to set up things at the barn, and you also want to educate yourself about the delivery of virtual education. It is its own skill set, and I would encourage you to go outside of the EAT industry to find some resources that will be helpful to you. Some resources that I like to use are iSpring Solutions and elearningindustry.com. These are both companies that do online education in a corporate setting, but online learning theories are the same across the board, and they offer free webinars and resources on different skills and ways that you can use to turn something that has traditionally been an in-person delivery to an online. Our participants also have a major factor in this. Do they have the tools to access the learning? And we want to make sure that what we are creating is applicable to them. We don't want to add to a burden of a family that's struggling to meet their basic needs. We want to offer a product that enhances what they're already having at home and make sure that we can set them up for success. So make sure that we're checking in with them and doing a survey of what they want to get out of this, and so that we cater our delivery to what they need. As a center, you want to set your goals of, so for this week, how many lessons you're going to offer, what time they're going to be, what topics, and be realistic about what you can offer. There is going to be a learning curve. Most of you indicated that you were brave enough to give this a try. Enlist your volunteers or a friend to help so that you can practice delivering these online lessons. It's a little bit different. I know it feels awkward for me talking to my blank screen right now, and interacting with a participant on the other end of a screen is going to feel a little bit different for a while. And it's okay for the goals that you set to evolve over time. And trial and error is definitely okay. Your participants will have a good sense of humor and will help you along through all of your struggles. When we're writing our lesson objectives, they're honestly not going to look a whole lot different than they do when we are in the arena teaching a horsemanship skill. So this is a learning objective that we have used. So participant will demonstrate the correct motions of the grooming tools, once with each hand, while following the visual prompts of the instructor. Looking at this objective, you cannot tell if I'm going to be teaching it online or in person. And through a video feed, I can help guide a participant along in learning the correct motions of the grooming tools. We can advance it from there. The participant will identify the correct sequence of the brushes for grooming 2 times with the verbal prompts from the instructor as needed. So we can do a few different activities. You can lay all the brushes out in front of the camera, label them so that they can choose which one comes first. You can also create an online activity where they have to drag and drop the brushes into place. And then we can continue on up our skill levels of, for each brush, participant will describe and independently label 2 parts of the horse that the brush is used on. So again, we're advancing this skill so that they are identifying the parts that their brush is used on, and showing more knowledge on this subject. Again, this is the same whether it would be in the arena or in an online setting. This is a great opportunity to review the gaps in our participants' knowledge and think about all the things that we don't have time or don't get a chance to cover while we're in the arena. Do your participants know their horse anatomy or their breeds? Do they know all the types of jobs that a horse can do? You can also use this to check their knowledge on a topic that you've covered before and see if it's still applicable and that they can still demonstrate that knowledge. And this will also then translate back into the arena of it's going to supplement what you are teaching online. I would argue that pretty much any horsemanship skill, the theory can be taught in an online format. I like to equate what we're doing with virtual telehorse lessons to completing the first aid and CPR training course online. So those are skills that you are only using in an in-person fashion, but through scenarios and training and videos, you are able to practice and retain those skills that you are learning online so that when it comes time to do them in person, you are ready to with it. Some topics that you might cover for skills.
Oh, sorry, Stephanie. We've had a couple of questions. If you could repeat the name of this, the online learning resources, please.
Yes, iSpring Solutions and elearningindustry.com.
Wonderful, thank you.
No problem. So back to some different skills that we can do online. So we can identify and sequence our grooming tools and tech. We can identify horse behaviors. We can practice 2-point posting and body alignment in our chair. We can learn about the proper care and nutrition of the horse. And the list goes on and on and on. In our CTRI criteria, there's 4 pages of skills that we are all tested on. Go back to that as a resource, as a list, and say, hey, we're going to start working our way through all of these different skills and offer those topics to your participants. Since we'll be laying a theoretical foundation for our participants for when we return, there is an education practice that is sometimes used called the flipped classroom, where instead of the traditional layout of participants or students will learn through a lecture in the classroom and do their homework at home, they flip that, where they provide educational tutorials and videos for at home, and then in the classroom the teacher works directly with the student to ensure that they have learned the material appropriately. So welcome to the flipped arena, where we can provide these education and these tutorials so that then when we come back to the horse, they already have a theoretical foundation and the hows and whys of why they're doing each of these skills. At a minimum, let your participants make choices. So some of our participants might not be able to engage a whole lot in an online setting, but encourage them to make choices. So an example that we had a participant that is very, very interested in barrel racing. And he is nonverbal and needed assistance in selecting items on the screen in our virtual lesson. We provided 5 photos of different horse sports that he could then select. Once he selected that, it took us to new photos of each horse sport, as well as a discussion question appropriate for his skill level that he could answer in a nonverbal way with a thumbs up or a thumbs down. If you can have your horse with you, great. Being able to go back and forth, so maybe starting from your computer, working on online activities, and then switching over to the horse is going to help engage. Make sure to get some brain breaks in there too. We do our lessons for about 30 minutes, and that's about the extent of the attention span that we have seen. So looking at that 20 to 45-minute attention span and taking a break if you need to so that you can keep everyone appropriately engaged. If the situation was different, we would all be thrilled that so many centers are launching a brand new program. So I want to help everyone shift the mindset of we're offering a new program on our centers, and this is exciting. We're going to a place that our industry has not gone before. We're going to teach horsemanship skills online. Since this is new and exciting, and it's just like any other addition to our program, we want to track the efficacy of it so that we can see the overall impact and keep this going as we move along. With your participants, make sure to go back to your objectives and write the progress notes of how successful they were in the lesson. This is going to help you track how well your program is working. And you still need to have the documentation of your attendance and your progress notes as you continue through this, and so that we can start showing that skill progression is going to be possible. You will see it in little pieces as you're doing your online lessons, and then when you go back to riding the horse, being able to see that big jump of knowledge of things that you have taught from the online setting. So what's next for us? So we've created a brand new program. We're offering virtual lessons. Our centers are now back open in a virtual setting. Don't throw this away. We created something really new and innovative. What I hope to see next year at conferences is a whole bunch of people submitting abstracts for how successful their online programming is and what they are using it to do in a creative way. Some ways that we have brainstormed at our center that we might be able to use this, it would be to supplement with virtual summer camp activities. We could offer extra sessions online during our natural breaks. And we could supplement teaching individualized coaching. So many centers have participants that would like to be in a private lesson or would like to ride more than once a week, but the center does not have the resources to do that. Offering online virtual lessons is a way to make those things possible so that we can extend our resources and continue the sustainability of this online program. And again, we just want to remember, like, if we're doing this, our centers are still open, and that's a positive thing. I am going to turn it over to some questions now, and I will get through as many as I possibly can. And I believe that Bret and Kathy are sending over any extra questions for us to answer afterwards if needed.
Yeah, Stephanie, we have a couple of questions about what are you charging for the virtual programming?
Yes.
Are you charging, and if so, how much?
Yes, so every center is going to have a different viewpoint on this. So some different options are offering these for free, asking for a donation, charging a minimal charge, or charging your normal price. I have seen centers doing every single option. At a minimum, I would recommend ask for a donation. You are still offering your services. We still have a gap in our funding that we need to make up for. If you can offer a really, really great online product, go ahead and charge for your sessions, but again, be aware of what your participants are going through, and if they are struggling in order to sustain their own daily living, make sure that you're being realistic about what you charge.
Great. And then the next question is, are you doing only individual programs or have you also tried small groups?
We have done both. So we have done groups of 1 to 3 with our traditional therapeutic riding participants. With our veterans and our volunteers, we have done larger sizes. 1 to 2 is pretty great. It's nice to be able to work with some of the participants in a one-on-one fashion. You may find that if you're working in a small group setting, that it's easier for the students to get lost in the material and you're not able to keep them as engaged. So I personally am preferring the individual settings, but it is nice to be able to still facilitate that communication between the students that were normally in classes. But you may consider just opening up a group chat time in Zoom or in another platform so that the participants can see each other and still have that social interaction, but then stay in a smaller group or a one-on-one setting for your education.
All right, and then we have a question just out of curiosity, how many of your participants or clients are participating in the virtual sessions?
Yeah, so we started last week and I believe that we offered 7 lessons and had 7 or 8 participants engaging, so it's a small number. We took some feedback from our participants and their families and adjusted the times that we offered based off of the school schedules. And we have shifted the times later to be afternoon and evening times, and then we're seeing an increase this week in the number of participants signing up.
Excellent. And then kind of along those lines, how are you managing the scheduling? Are individuals instructors doing their own classes, or are you opening it up to multiple instructors, larger groups?
Yeah, we have a small teaching team, so we're able to do this all as a collaborative effort. One fun lesson learned, we did our registration through Google Forms, and I forgot to close it overnight. And so the morning we woke up and we had a lesson scheduled for ourselves at 9 a.m. and we hadn't prepped for it because they had registered at midnight. So make sure you shut off your registration unless you want a surprise lesson the next day.
Good tip there. And how are you holding participants accountable for what is part of the virtual lessons?
Same way as you would in a lesson. So making sure to engage them, make sure that they are doing as asked. You can reinforce. You need to ask for their parents' help if needed, so that if you're trying to do a hand over hand technique of practicing with the grooming tools, that they are there to support them. But again, the kind of the same behavior management techniques that you use in the arena are still going to apply, and making sure that your material and activities are engaging enough so that you can keep their attention, that you're teaching at the appropriate skill level.
Excellent. And then what kind of platforms do you use to create a resource that can use the drag and drop type of interactives?
Yes, PowerPoint and Google Slides will create some types of those scenarios for you. With the learning management system through the Virtual Education Co-op, we have a learning management system called Moodle, and that allows to create drag and drop scenarios. There is a plugin for WordPress websites called H5P Interactive Content. It's a free plugin and will create everything from clickable photos with info. You can make infographics, you can do flashcards, memory games, word searches, and so that's a really great tool if you have WordPress to incorporate.
Wonderful. And then I think a question that is pertinent to a lot of folks is how do you get hesitant parents to get on board with the virtual lessons?
Reach out to them. So a lot of this is going to be marketing. Again, it's a new program. Any new programs that we've started at our centers did not start without marketing and outreach to the community. So get on the phone, give them a call, tell them what it's all about. We phrase it as they're still receiving the same type of lesson that will include a physical warm-up, a skill, and an activity, and time with their horse. And so structuring it so that it's an appealing product of something that we already are offering, and then just helping them understand what goes into it. So a lot of hesitancy will come from not knowing what a horse riding lesson looks like online, and so we need to do that extra work of explaining what this new format of our lesson is going to look like.
Great. And then we do have we're going to wrap up now with a couple of a couple more questions, but we do have, again, a request for you to repeat the resources, the online resources that you used, and then also the tool through WordPress. So if you could take a moment to share those, I'll identify
Yes.
two more questions.
Yep, iSpring Solutions. I think I can type this into the chat too, can't I, Bret?
Yes, you're welcome to do that. And also we will follow up with all of this information afterwards. Okay. So, but people are asking.
iSpring Solutions and e-learning industry. And the plugin is called H5P Interactive Content. And I'll type that into the chat in a moment.
Great, and then we do have questions. Do you have samples of these lessons, or are there options to view an example online lesson, whether that's a YouTube video or a tutorial, basically?
Yeah, I'm happy to put something together so that we can have a video. I know there's some other instructors out there that have had a chance to record their lessons. And on the Virtual Education Co-op, we do have sample lesson plans available that centers and instructors can use.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Stephanie. And then again, to clarify, Stephanie is going to type in those resources into the chat portion of the GoToWebinar menu, but we will also follow up after the webinar with a link to the recording along with resources, the PowerPoint presentations, and then we can also include these resources that she has spoken about. Thank you very much, Stephanie.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So now we're going to take just a moment here and we're going to ask you another question, another poll. So here we go. All right, so if you're happy and you know it, a lot of people are going with the default answer, clap your hands. But actually we have hug an animal, a horse of course, right now is at 67% of the vote, followed by clap your hands. Then we have laugh out loud, that's a good one. Next, do a happy dance, and surprisingly, in last place, jump for joy. Okay. But we do have hug an animal as the most popular choice. And with that, now we're going to go ahead and turn over the webinar to Meggan McQueeney, who is going to talk about virtual veteran programming.
Oh, Bret, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you.
Excellent. I'm so glad that they chose hug a horse. That's definitely, in my opinion, the right answer. So thank you everyone for your time today. I know that so many of us are busy in a new and very different world. I want to spend a little bit of your time talking about veteran virtual programming. This PowerPoint will be available for you. So if you're trying to take notes, I don't think that'll be necessary because we'll provide this for you. And I think Stephanie's presentation is perfect as a springboard for what I'm going to talk about and get into some more specifics on some options for you. It's great news what Kathy said today as far as us being able to submit for reimbursement. And we're going to go ahead and get started here on resilience and being able to adapt and overcome here. Can you see my screen okay, Bret?
Yep, looks good.
Okay, so first of all, I just want to talk to you all about it's important now more than ever to reach deep into our veteran population. So if you all can really take the time first and foremost to think about who you're currently serving in your programs at your centers, which specific veteran populations you are already working with is key. Really thinking about ages, you know, if you're working with younger vets, OEF, OIF versus maybe older vets who, you know, are over 65 and really are targeted right now for being more of a in a dangerous population to be affected by COVID, and thinking through about how that anxiety could really amass to something larger. Thinking through your demographics of who you're serving, and just, you know, we work at Brave Hearts. We worked with over 1,000 veterans last year, so We really had to study who all we were serving, all the different VA hospitals and vet centers and different groups, and really try to make sure that we didn't leave anyone behind in our virtual designs of our programs that we're doing. So just recognizing the urgent need for those of you all that are serving veterans right now. I just pulled some of the quotes from emails and texts I've been getting. I underlined here one on the bottom left, and again, we'll share this PowerPoint with you for later to take a look at understanding what veterans are conveying to us right now, but really saying that I'm having a hard time with even basic functioning. Here's some more quotes, and this one I underlined, I feel a bit lost and really don't have a sense of purpose. And then in this one was a letter I got a couple of Friday nights ago that talked about the 18 days that this individual veteran had been without the barn. And they said that without the barn, it feels like a piece of myself is missing. So I think this is a bittersweet time for centers for programs to really know. I know we all know how important our programs are, but really thinking through the fact that centers, farms, horses are lifelines to people. And when they don't have access to those right now, it can really shatter one's world. So we recognize that there is an urgent need to do something. So we also need to take a look at various diagnoses that veterans deal with on a daily basis, and recognizing that their previous vulnerabilities are being exacerbated by COVID-19. So again, this is all feedback that I've gotten personally from a lot of our veterans as far as what they're enduring at this particular time while dealing with COVID-19 and what's happening in the world. PTSD episodes, a veteran just told me this yesterday, that the longer they go without their PTSD symptoms, which was happening while they were at our farm and riding and taking place, participating in our programs, then the harder it is when those symptoms return. Increased anxiety is occurring right now in veterans, increased depression, fear, stress, isolation, lethargy, hypervigilance, physical pain. A lot of vets deal with back issues. That's one of our most common symptoms that we see. And so understanding that without them having the current movement of a horse, of walking around the farms, of being active and being more restricted to staying at home, that physical pain can return. Increase of flashbacks and thoughts of substance abuse because so many groups are inactive at this time, and difficulty sleeping, and just an overall low resilience is frequently being reported by veterans who have been quite active in our programs. So brainstorming, what can we all do about this? What our center did was we really started to look first at our current outlets, and I would encourage you all that operate at your centers to do the same, to really think through of what pieces of communication you already have, and then how you can increase those. So if you have a social media presence already, if you're already set up with Facebook or Instagram or Snapchat or Twitter or whatnot, of how you can really reach more of your participants by increasing that, whether it's with more images or more interaction, or even providing more video content. Text messages. We use what's called a Remind app for our veterans. And again, this is going to be critical for us when we roll out our virtual programs, because we can click on that and it can give a 5-minute reminder that our virtual horsemanship program is starting in 5 minutes. Our email marketing, so we utilize Constant Contact, and we also do weekly Friday emails for all of our veterans to, again, let them feel connected and know what's happening in our programs. And we've maintained this status quo whether we've been in operation or whether we've been dealing with COVID. If you're already sending out newsletters and mailings, again, there's plenty of individuals that still don't have the technology, and how you can still try and reach them and keeping them connected to your centers. thinking through your calendars and what systems you already have in place and trying to make a plan. We use Team Up for our calendars. We've gone through and really edited all of those calendars for COVID-19. So instead of having our regular, let's say Monday through Saturday sessions and lessons for veterans, and maybe Friday, Saturdays, and Sundays for retreats, we've now substituted those calendars with all of our different virtual programs and plugging those in for veterans to be able to follow and to be able to look forward to. If you have a website already, designing a page that's specifically to COVID. What is your center doing? What support services are you going to provide? And how can your community help you? And then just utilizing each of these already established communications systems that you already have with your center to reach across all mediums and in specificity to the veteran community. So here's some new ideas, and these are just ideas for you to think about, to plan for a very different world. And this is really what our center started, and you can pick and choose from here what may or may not work for your community that you serve of veterans. What we did first off the bat was we picked up the phone and we checked in with all, like I said, we have hundreds and hundreds of participants, but really tried to do check-ins, assessments, and finding out what their real needs were. And if we found a veteran who was in crisis, making sure that they knew the crisis line, and also I'll talk about here in a minute about connecting them with telehealth opportunities so that they can meet one-on-one with a mental health therapist if that needed to happen. Secondly, our center really began to invest in some new tools to help get us started, whether it was Zoom and having the option for longer than 40-minute sessions, Remind, our Team Up calendars, all of those kind of platforms to really start to grow your virtual programs and all of your ideas. We initially started with just a broader, genuine virtual program. And the number one thing we heard when we first closed our centers on March 17th was everyone missed our horses. They wanted to see the horses. We heard about vets who were having their picture next to their bed with their horse and how impactful our horses were. So we simply went to Google Nest and bought a camera, and we started a live feed camera, and we posted each day. We initially started with an hour a day for vets to be able to see our horses. We called it Dinner with Boone or Dinner with Duke. And we would basically just put the camera in the stall showing the horse eating. And we had to actually increase that because of the feedback that we got of how impactful that was. We now extended that to a 2-hour segment every day. And we also have staff members there to answer questions on that particular horse. So it's interactive as well. Next, we really gave ourselves some space to reflect and brainstorm with members of our team, our board, our volunteers, to also help keep them engaged and to let them know the importance of our community and the critical time period that we were facing to serve them. And we really took a look at our live feed cam and how that was working and how we could grow from there. So we began to let our donors know, and I think this is really important for you all that are working. Our center operates that we don't charge any veteran for any program. And so it became really important for our team to connect with our donors, picking up the phone, putting together emails to let our grantors know and our donors know that we were going to continue on, that we have a vulnerable population, that just because our doors might be open and our farms might be closed doesn't mean that we're going to stop serving this very fragile population that we work with. And so we began to lean on our donors and ask them for support in some of the platforms. And really just, it was even helpful, it was motivational, I know from my standpoint, just to hear how many grantors were excited to know that we were going to continue on and that we weren't just closing our doors, and how they were going to help step up. And from there, we then got a lot of our grantors opened up doors and said, let's adjust your 2020 grant, or have you taken a look at this funding over here? Next up, we really started to initiate peer support. So we started to lean on our veterans, again, back to that individual veteran that, as I mentioned earlier in that quote that said they didn't feel purpose, of really trying to connect our veterans with one another. So we started to a daily support call. And on these support calls, we typically have a veteran lead it with a staff member, and we pick a different topic every day for an hour. And that could be on mindfulness, or it could be on horsemanship, or it could be on Mustang training. It could be on any topic, but we're really paying close attention to our veterans and what things they want and how they're looking for help, and just making it an open discussion where veterans can talk to one another, and we can have a staff member to really help guide the conversations. Also, our veterans also requested a Facebook group so they could talk with one another. After we got some of these set up, then we started to launch more virtual programs. And what we really wanted to do was to build some video content of our time with the horses and really start to roll that out. And so first what we did was we started that with our volunteer training. We have an advanced leader group of volunteers of about 30 volunteers, and I rolled that out with them. I took about 15 short videos of myself working with a horse and asked our volunteers for feedback and how they liked that and how we could really incorporate that with the training of our volunteers and our horses. And then I next rolled that out with how we could really create virtual horsemanship with our veterans. We record those now. We are doing a series of 10, and then we will also be able to duplicate those with other VA hospitals and groups that come on board. We are creating a trail course this summer. That was our original plan, our goal for 2020. And so now we've even taken that concept and again, put it back in our veterans laps to ask them to each take an element of the trail course where they can meet weekly on Zoom and just talk about that and really keeping their hands and their minds busy. We also launched Brave Health, which was a concept again that our veterans told us that they wanted to share and to help one another, where each day they're actually, one veteran is sending us content, whether it be on making a smoothie or gardening or doing some yoga exercises. Again, because veterans are so driven to help one another, so mission driven, that this also has taken great shape within our organization. And also, again, from a veterans idea, they really wanted to see behind the scenes. So we're also launching a virtual program where we're filming when the veterinarian still has to come in to vaccinate, or when our team still has to worm horses, or the farrier still has to come out to the farm to take care of horses. And we're actually videoing that to, again, help educate our veterans and to give them some more virtual content. Next up, we went out to branch into smaller groups of our veterans. So we learned from our veterans that a lot of the substance abuse support groups weren't happening. And our team really wanted to provide that outlet. So we created a specific Zoom called the Recovery Support Group. Again, for veterans, they're already comfortable. They already see each other. There's quite a bit of camaraderie at our center where they can join and support each other in their recovery support group. We also have a drill team that typically rides every Friday at Bravehearts. And so again, they continued their efforts. And again, every Friday night still have their drill team Zoom meeting. From that, we found that a lot of our veterans were really wanting to step up in more of a leadership role on our virtual programming. And I'll show you a slide here coming up on how we really started to slot veterans in to give them more of a stake and input on each of our virtual programs. As Stefani mentioned, the measurable outcome of everything we do for virtual components is extremely important. So when we started with our veterans and we did our call-in, as I mentioned initially, we also took an assessment. Currently, now that we've started our virtual programs, we're also doing a wellness survey, and we plan to continue to repeat that wellness survey 2 weeks after we start programming back up. We really believe to use this as an opportune time to again let our our organization know how important our programs are and what the value is of both virtual programming and in-person experiential learning. And lastly, we're constantly evaluating our virtual programs through surveys, again, asking our veterans what's working for them, what they're enjoying. And again, we're looking at our numbers as far as attendance and which of our virtual programs are really taking off. Finally, developing a piece that captures all of your information, really thinking through carefully what type of virtual support you're offering, and then educating your volunteers on that, your grants, your donors, because none of us know how long this is going to continue. So why not capture it now so you can have evidence to all the great things and the opportunities of support you're trying to continue to do. This is one of the documents that we've created, again, just to showcase some of our pieces that we have started to build in specifically during COVID-19. We've created a new Heartline newsletter that tells everyone about all of our virtual programs. We have, as I've mentioned, our recovery support group and so forth. This is some more samples of our response. As you can see in the bottom right-hand corner, our virtual lessons, and on the left-hand bottom corner, our vet virtual leadership. So again, on the far left column, you can see some of our virtual programs that we're rolling out that we have already happening at our center, the staff member who's in charge of each, and then we've also empowered a veteran to support. So they're helping provide content and ideas and help making sure that we can recruit veterans to join us for this. So virtual horsemanship, what all does that entail? And I know Stefani tapped into quite a bit of this, but we're gonna pause here for a short clip so you can see how I did this. It doesn't have to be complicated. I simply just took my iPhone and while working with a horse, just started to capture some of the content with them, and how we're building this into themes. And this is just some time here working with a young horse. So Bret, you're gonna start.
And we're kind of messing around with the rope today, kind of getting her real gentle and real broke to just about everything. The rope is great for getting them soft and halter broke, for kind of getting them a little bit more confident so that I can tap on her either side and I can rub this anywhere. When she kind of drifts away from that, I'm going to try to ask for her to come back towards me again. You saw how I just kind of use my body to draw her back in me. And here again, I'll just draw her to me just like that. Just by kind of sucking. And here again, if she kind of looks away, I just kind of tuck my body up and get her to come a little bit close to me. And again, with this rope, I'll come around this other side. She's not quite as good on the other side. You can see she wants to block me with her left eye here. A bit more left eye dominant. But I'm going to come and work the right side. And again, when I feel like she's good and tolerant of that, I'm going to give her a big old release there. If she wants to hunt me into that release, even better.
Just a little bit of our content that we're creating, and we've actually rolled all these different snippets into a short series of about 10 different sessions, and we are again really taking seriously the veterans' feedback and what all they want to see and to learn. So everything from groundwork to riding to training to again continue to develop their continuing education, even if it is virtually. So there's more and more, program ideas that you might want to come up with. These are just a list of more options, book clubs specifically on, a great horse book. I know that's something that one of our staff members wants to launch and so forth. Sky's the limit. And again, we're relying heavily, I know our organization is on veterans and what they would like to see. here's some of the pros and cons. We're averaging about 18 to 25 veterans on most of our virtual programs. Right now, 85% of our regular veteran attendants are participating in our virtual experiences that we're launching. We're rotating through our staff and veterans just to make sure that we can still connect the right person to the right veteran, to the veterans that work best, and just making sure that we still keep some one-on-one contact. Creating a routine. When we're having our virtual sessions, typically, like right now, there's a 2 o'clock session going on that is our support calls. That's every day. Our live feeds always are 4 to 6 in the afternoon. So again, just, and we get that feedback from the vets that they love normalcy, looking forward to something that they can really count on. We're also, much like Stefani said, enjoying this time, as difficult as it can be, to really look at creating creative content and being able to look at these as being some tangible concepts that we hope that we can use in years to come, that provide a lot of continuity in our training and in our programs. Some of the cons, some of the things to forewarn you about that are difficult with our virtual veteran programming is that sometimes some vets are not quick to respond. And again, that goes back into where that one-on-one connection is critical. Some veterans may prefer Zoom and some may prefer calls. We can all have preferences, and again, just recognizing sometimes the IT differences. Obviously, the various platforms that we're all trying to learn can be extremely time consuming. Right now, we try to look at trying to get things out simply and accurately, and getting it relevant and timely to what veterans are saying that they need. And the biggest con of all, I think this is the elephant in the room that I just want to pay tribute to, is that nothing we do is going to replace the horse. Nothing. Nothing is going to replace our farms or centers or each of you all and your impact that you have with veterans and with the community you serve. But we're still trying to deliver our best, and we're still trying to give that element of support. And just again, understanding that technology is not always our friend, and how we can work around that. We've even had to do, we do veteran Zoom trainings where even before they go to a virtual horsemanship, they can actually jump on beforehand for a half hour, and our staff, our volunteers, other veterans can walk them through how to get set up so that everybody is comfortable and user friendly. These are just some responses from our veterans. Again, and I love this quote, when everything around us has seemed to close, it's felt that brave hearts never left. I just think that's something that we can be proud of, and hopefully your centers can be able to say the same. The fallout, I just want to let you all know this, for those of you all that don't want to do the virtual programming, and I know it can seem cumbersome and time consuming, but if we don't continue to keep our doors open to some degree, it's going to be that much harder to get veterans to return. So I think keeping them engaged now is key. Continuity is critical. And Stefani mentioned some of these as well, but we're all struggling with, the loss of fundraising events, and about billable activities, and our increase in some of our costs and so forth, and how we all have to maintain our herd still, even though there's not programs going on. So how we can be creative and still work through that is really key. And this last bullet here, if you all will take a look at it, this just came out a couple days ago, and I thought it was extremely timely. It came out from the National Council for Behavioral Health. And their CEO said, if we don't take steps now to avert the collapse of the system, we can expect millions of individuals with mental illness and addictions to arrive in overtaxed emergency departments across the country. This psychological toll that the pandemic is taking on many Americans needs to be recognized. So it's just something that I want to point out, that we all, I think, have a responsibility, for those of us that are already running centers and teaching and working with veterans, to really make sure that no one slips through the cracks during this critical time period. finally, this is just a list of some of the tools and links that I mentioned that we can provide for you if you all have any interest in learning how to use them. I think that wraps it up for my presentation, Bret.
Wonderful. We do have a handful of questions here, so we'll try to get to as many of them as we can before moving on. Are there any concerns or issues arising with confidentiality, or are the programs you set up, are they more public groups versus actual client therapy?
Yeah, that's a great question. What we are actually doing right now is our support groups and all of our virtual program is only available right now for veterans who, first of all, already have completed their 2020 packets. So that means that all of their information is already on file, just like we would already have if they were riding and participating. And then secondly, when we do those check-ins at the very beginning with our veterans and assessments, it's a really great time to tell them about what virtual programs we have and finding out if they have interest in those. I think one of the best ones that is a great one for protecting more of the confidentiality piece is our conference calls, which we still do a lot of those. I taught one here yesterday, and I think we had about 23 people on it, and it was only, I think, 18 people stated their name, and that's fine too. We just are happy to know that there's people on the line, and whether they want to say they're there or not is up to them, and they can still have that privacy piece to them if they'd like to.
Excellent. And then are the majority of your virtual programs presented live, or are they archived, emailed, recorded, emailed, or uploaded to be viewed at any time?
Yeah, our live feed that we do every day for 2 hours in the evening, that is all live, and so that's fully interactive. We have done a few Facebook Live series as well, and obviously all of our Zoom events are live too. We take some of our video content, just like what we did today, and we'll introduce that and talk about techniques and horsemanship that's going to be presented, and then we'll run the clips, and then we'll take all of the questions and the feedback from the veterans. And it's just an awesome time for vets to share, you know, I wish I would have known that, or that's great to know for next time, or feedback that they might even want to share on a particular day with a particular horse, when something that they have had already happened to them or coming in the future. So I guess, Bret, to answer that question is, I guess we use a bit of a blend. And again, we're just operating, I'm going to say 99% on veteran feedback. They're dictating to us what they like and what's working, and we're on that road with them.
Excellent. And we have a handful of inquiries asking if you would be able to share some of the materials that Brave Hearts has created. So the sample surveys, the newsletters, particularly the wellness survey. Is that information that you're able to share with everybody?
Yep, I will get with our team and we will see what all we're comfortable in releasing, and we'd be happy to do that. And again, I think the whole purpose of I think why Joann and Stefani and I know Path are doing this is so that we can try and reach more people. If we're confident that our materials are universal, then we're absolutely happy to share it, Bret.
Fantastic. Thank you, Meggan.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody. God bless.
Excellent. All right. And before we move on to our next presenter, we have one more poll for you. This one, another little bit of a fun one here. What are your most effective stress relievers right now? We'll give you about 60 seconds here to plug in your vote. You can pick multiple, not just one. So far, looks like animals are in the winning one. Of course, that's not surprising given our population here. But also, 65% of you are saying movement, so that doesn't surprise us either. Movement is obviously a big part of what our instructors do every day. 32% of you are saying beverage or food, comfort food perhaps. 2% of you say vegetables. So we might be a little bit low in the vegetable consumption department among us here today. and 1% minerals. So, that's vitamins and whatnot, but definitely still a front runner. 78% of you saying that animals are your most effective stress reliever. Thank you for sharing that with us today. Now we're going to go ahead and pass it over to Joann Benjamin.
And Bret, I'm waiting to see, do you see my screen?
We don't see your screen just yet. We can hear you.
Okay.
You'll need to click the screen sharing option, the little monitor. There we see your webcam.
Okay, and show screen.
There we go. There you are. Now we see your title slide. You are ready to go.
Okay, thank you, thank you. As you can tell, technology is not my forte, so wow, I went into this whole telehealth thing kicking and screaming because it was a whole new thing for me, but I very quickly learned that I'm not alone, and it sounds like from the survey that I'm amongst others who might be kicking and screaming going into doing the virtual services as well. But for those of you who haven't taken a trip in that direction, I will tell you that I've been pleasantly surprised at some of the advantages. I think we've heard quite a few of those from Stefani and Meggan. And what I'd like to share with you today is where we can fit in as therapists, whether PT, OT, or speech, or even mental health providers in the provision of telehealth to our patients. It's interesting because telehealth is not new in the medical field, but as a practical solution, it's exploded over the last month as a viable treatment option given the current situation. So there's been a big change in what's happening in terms of the modifications of some of the regulations, some of the restrictions, and certainly the education of how to apply this medium for our patients and make treatment accessible for those that would not be able to access it. So what I'd like to do today is point out some of the nuts and bolts of providing telehealth, and particularly maybe pointing out some issues specifically related to those of us who are doing therapy and also incorporating equine movement or hippotherapy into our practice, as there are a few little ticks that might be specifically related to those. So let's get started with that. Well, the disclaimer. It is a crazy, crazy world out there because the information resources are abundant, and a lot of the information is changing as much as daily. Actually, when Meggan even mentioned some things that came out on the internet that she picked up recently. So my caution to those of you who are going to venture out is to be certain that any information that you are picking up off of the internet is as current as possible and that you've double checked when it came out and whether or not they're still in effect. Much of the current federal, state, and local regulations and restrictions have been deemed applicable during this national emergency. After that time, all bets are off. We have no idea what's going to happen. So those are things that you really need to keep in mind if you're going to venture into this medium. Not only what is the current thinking, but being aware that things might change even as you're going about providing services. Know the regulations and be in contact with your professional organizations, whether that's the APTA, the AOTA, ASHA, the ACA for the counselors, and certainly the American Hippotherapy Association. Know what they are saying about the services that you're providing so that you can be sure and be on top of any of that service delivery. So the question is, are you ready? Are you ready for this treatment? And when I say you, I'm talking about both you as a provider as well as your patients out there. This is a new thing for probably the majority of us. And so we need to find out, first of all, is there interest? Do you feel comfortable in providing this service? Do your patients feel comfortable in participating in it? Are people intimidated by it? With everything going on right now, is learning something this new too much to deal with, or is it a distractor? Is it something exciting and fun for them to do so that they embrace it wholeheartedly? Just please know, though, it's not right for everybody. And so as excited as you are about providing service, your patients may not be ready. And as excited as that some of your patients might be about receiving services, if you don't feel that comfort zone, I just strongly encourage you to just not go there yet, or go there with a mentor, or go there with support. Stefani and Meggan did a great job of talking about some of the technology involved, but that has to be a part of it. And we've got hardware that everybody's got to have, and the software that goes along with it. As I mentioned, telehealth is not a brand new thing for the healthcare industry. So there are already existing platforms out there that you can avail yourself of. And then again, you can kind of wing it and use other sorts of apps and programs. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in just a minute. So you've got that technology you need to make sure is available. And then something as basic as having prescriptions for treatment. So most often you're probably going to be treating existing patients. For those of us who are working and doing therapy where we're incorporating horses, unfortunately, you may go back to your charts and discover that your prescriptions may not have been written correctly. In other words, if you have a prescription that you're operating on that's written for hippotherapy or written for equine-related services, that's not going to cut it, because you can no longer do hippotherapy virtually. You can no longer do equine movement virtually. And so that prescription, although it should have been in the past, absolutely now needs to be written for the service that you're providing, whether that's PT, OT, or speech. So be sure that you're on board and accurate with all of that. The consent situation is a little bit different in the telehealth realm than it is for a traditional treatment clinic setting, where you will have your consents for treatment in your chart for your existing patients. But what has been required is that your patients do consent to participating in telehealth. And that is consent that needs to be documented in some format, whether that's an email or verbal consent with you documenting it. Check with your state practice acts to know what that has to entail. You also need to inform your patients that there is more potential here for a breach of confidentiality. And we're going to talk about that also a little bit later. But it's something that is right up front and is very different than treating in a very controlled environment, such as a clinic or a rehab setting or something along those lines. And some of the other things you need to think about are looking at the treatment medium as it is, watching your patients through a screen and having some idea in your mind ahead of time of some of the contingencies that might occur. What are you going to do if your internet feed goes out? What do you do if you have a security breach through your internet? We've heard about some of the Zoom bombers coming into some of the Zoom chat rooms. So have an idea of some of those things. And probably most important in my mind is knowing that you're working with patients who obviously are working with you because of medical issues, and should, heaven forbid, something happen to them medically, they should fall, they should have an accident, they should have a seizure, something should happen. How are you going to help them? Because you are not there. You're physically not capable of doing that. And you also might be tying up any communication lines for emergency services with your telehealth. So make sure to think about some of those things ahead of time and have some ideas in mind about how you're going to deal with some of those circumstances. So when we talk about telehealth, I just want to point out that there are actually several very distinct types of virtual services in the medical field. Those are e-visits, virtual check-ins, and I'm not going to talk about those at all because we don't have time, but I'm going to concentrate on telehealth because I think that's probably the most applicable in our circumstance in terms of being an outpatient therapy provider right now. And some considerations along those lines. I know that Stefani had mentioned that concept of a synchronous versus asynchronous, in our instance, care for the patient. Telehealth can exist in a synchronous manner, meaning you are online, you are in real time communicating with your patient or the caregivers, and everything that you do is very similar to the treatment that you did in a clinic or pre-virus, PV. Telehealth can also occur asynchronously, meaning that you are exchanging information back and forth with your patient, whether they're sending you videos of something they're doing, you are responding via email about an exercise program that you want them to start. There's a lot of communication, but it's not occurring online. It's not occurring at the same time. There's a time lapse in between. Those two are not mutually exclusive. So again, either of them can be considered within a telehealth scenario. Other considerations, kind of back to some of those regulations and restrictions that we were talking about earlier. Does your state actually allow for telehealth? Not all do. Most of them are now on board, but make sure that your Practice Act has now been amended, if it wasn't inclusive before, to allow for it, not only for you as a therapist, but if you're an assistant, making sure that you are following the guidelines and regulations of this particular treatment scenario. The other thing that comes up that you wouldn't normally think about having patients come into a clinic or meet you at a barn is that you are now potentially treating patients across state lines, especially if you live in an area where you're near the border. So be sure that you're covered and you're licensed to practice where the patient is, not necessarily where you are specifically. So just be sure that you've gotten all of those I's dotted and T's crossed in terms of being able to provide that care, and that you're doing it all legally and ethically. Speaking of which is the question on confidentiality. And we've already talked about the idea that you must have consent from your patients to participate in telehealth. And you also, as a provider, need to document that in each of your progress notes that you have discussed it, that your patient is aware and has been informed of that version of treatment provision. Health and Human Services and the Office of Civil Rights, which is a subset of them, has in fact indicated that they have loosened some of their enforcement of the HIPAA regulations. And we'll go to the next slide in a second to talk more specifically about that. But the idea here is that we were all jumping in to be able to provide telehealth in a very hurried manner given the circumstances. And so it was acknowledged by the Office of Civil Rights that not all of us would have time to get everything in order as far as the paperwork, a BAA, which is the Business Associate Agreement, and those kinds of things. So HHS will not necessarily enforce some of the regulations that might be breached, as long as you as a provider provide a good faith provision that you have done what you can reasonably do to ensure your patient's protection of privacy and confidentiality. So some of that is in your choice of platforms. You're not going to be using public-facing platforms to do treatment. You are going to try and find a platform that has a reasonable amount of security about it. The other thing, again, that you don't often think about, I have actually several patients who are currently sheltering in place, as they should be, and I am communicating with them when the patient is one of maybe 4 or 6 people living in a studio apartment or in a 1-bedroom apartment, and doesn't have the opportunity to separate themselves from their family or caregivers. And I need to be very cognizant of that, as they do, as to whether or not they want to participate in treatment where it can't be a confidential sharing of information. So those are things that, again, are introduced in this setting that you wouldn't normally think about. On the flip side of that is, can I as a provider, because I'm doing all of this out of my home, assure that I can provide my services confidentially to the patient, and my husband's not walking through the room, and I don't have kids hanging out that's going to overhear the communications or oversee the videos that are being exchanged. So again, those are just things to think about in this arena. So I wanted to share with you something that came off of the HHS website, which is the Office of Civil Rights will exercise its enforcement discretion and will not impose penalties for non-compliance with the regulatory requirements under the existing HIPAA rules against covered healthcare providers in connection, again, with that good faith provision of telehealth during the COVID-19 nationwide public health emergency. And that notification was effective as of March 17th. Again, please note, it's during this emergency. So remember that when that emergency declaration is taken away, we may be dealing with some very different regulations. Also, that providers are encouraged to notify patients that these third-party applications potentially introduce privacy risks, as we just discussed, and all providers should enable all available encryption and privacy modes when using those applications. So you've got to do your due diligence and treat it as responsibly as you can. Again, that business associate agreement is being waived, although there are plenty of platforms out there that already have those agreements available for you to set up. So if you can, go ahead and use a platform where that's already provided. So some of the nuts and bolts as a therapist, as a healthcare provider, Again, I can't emphasize enough, make sure your prescriptions are written correctly, not for hippotherapy or equine-related activity. Make sure you've got those consents all set up and ready to go. Make sure you've got that physical setup. You've got all the equipment that you might need. I might want to demonstrate how to use a piece of equipment for my patient so that they can use it correctly. I want to have all of that with me when I get started with my telehealth session. I want to make sure the platform is downloaded and I know how to use it and everything's been checked out in terms of the sound and the video quality, all of that. Another glitch that I ran into, a pitfall that I'll share with you to not do when you set up the contact information you have with your patients. I actually have a patient who has a landline and shared that number with me. And when it came time to sign up and get in touch with her via Zoom, I realized I had no way to get in touch with her. So make sure that the contact information you have is what you're going to need when you connect via your platform. And then I'm a big proponent of not reinventing the wheels, as it sounds like a lot of you are when you were requesting some of the already developed resources that Stefani and Meggan have made. I have to admit, I was flabbergasted when I went onto YouTube and found out the amazing resources that are on there, from exercise programs to songs to play during treatment to other equipment that can be ordered for the patients to have at home. So there's just all kinds of resources out there, and don't think that you have to make it all up yourself. There's, again, plenty of platforms out there. And then please avail yourself of your colleagues. Particularly AHA has had already some communications, some Facebook postings, webinars, that sort of thing, so that you're not just starting from scratch. It's intimidating to get all this stuff together, and there's plenty of people out there who have already taken the first step. With your patient, set up a scheduled time. Do they need anything available? If you want to do a activity with them, make sure that they've got everything that they need. Another thing to be really sure is on their end, who's going to operate their video. I can't tell you how dizzy I can get sometimes when a mom is trying to help their kiddo and hold the cell phone and make it work so that I can see everything going on. Or does your patient need someone to assist them in getting the exercises accomplished or the task done? And so make sure that you've got those people around. I'm going to run through these real quickly. I realize I'm running low on time here, but telehealth can be whatever you want it to be. It can be activities just directly communicating with your patient, just a similar way as you would in the clinic, although it's only your voice as an aid to use in that way. It can be activities in a grouping. So I had a session the other day where I had my patient doing Ring Around the Rosie with her siblings, and it was a great opportunity for me to kind of coach them. So that's an activity that they could do later on in a group. I can provide instruction to the parents or the caregivers, especially if I have a patient that's not able to actively participate. And that's a real important advantage for the caregivers to be able to learn from the guidance of the therapist. Another really cool opportunity with this is the chance to observe. I had a patient the other day where I got talking to the nanny, and I saw the patient migrate over to the other side of the room and saw her playing with toys and doing some activities. And it was a great chance for me to observe her and then give feedback to the nanny on how to facilitate or inhibit some of the things that she was doing. We don't know how long this is going to last, and some of us are going to be ready to do progress reports and standardized testing with our patients. There are test measures out there that are patient report or that can be administered by somebody who is not directly trained in the administration of that particular test. So be sure and again check that out ahead of time so that you know that you're using the appropriate standardized tests that might be out there. On your PowerPoint slides, I had a fun task where I just got emailed colleagues as well as parents and patients to find out what they felt were some of the advantages or the pros of telehealth, and then we'll show you some of the disadvantages. But I think one of the most telling advantages that I heard was a mom who shared with me that she finally started to get it. She was forced into doing all of these hands-on activities with her kiddo, and with my guidance, she really started to feel comfortable in getting engaged with this activity. And so it was just a real eye-opener as well as reassurance to me that it can be very, very beneficial to our patients. The disadvantages, obviously, number one, you can't get on a horse. So no longer is that equine movement able to be part of my treatment session, and no longer can I be hands-on. And that's the thing that I, as a therapist, feel the most uncomfortable with. But it's doable. There's ways to substitute. There's other ways to apply tools to benefit our patients. Another major disadvantage is, since I'm working with a lot of 2- and 3-year-olds, is it's forcing more screen time for them. But I think that's kind of a universal unknown right now that we're going to be finding out soon on how much of a disadvantage that truly is in the long term. I'm not going to really talk much about reimbursement other than to caution you to make sure that you find out from your insurance companies, from your payer sources, exactly what codes to use, what place of service to use, whether or not they actually even cover telehealth. A lot of the state governors have mandated that telehealth is covered, but that's not universal. It's not across the board. It's also not universal for Medicaid. So be sure that you access, again, your professional organizations, the AHA website, to find out more about what you should or should not be doing in terms of reimbursement. Words of wisdom, keep up to date. Anticipate the end. This is a great opportunity for us to learn more about our treatment strategies and how we employ them, to learn to appreciate when we miss the horse as part of our treatment. But get ready for the transition back to the pre-virus world. It will come. Don't know what it's going to look like yet, but it will come. And that's all that I've got to share with you.
Excellent. Joann, we do have a couple of questions here. We realize we're over time, but we don't want to to cut short on questions here, so we'll go through them. We have a couple of people wondering if you can provide an example of a prescription that would include virtual contact or telehealth.
Your prescription is just as it always should have been, which is for PT, OT, speech, whatever your professional discipline is. Very simple. PT, evaluate and treat, or treatment as necessary. So keep it simple.
Yeah, right. No major changes there. Regarding having ancillary people around, what do you suggest if it's necessary to have an interpreter around for language needs?
The same as you would previously. If it's somebody that really needs to be there, you need to have the consent that the patient is obviously wanting that person there, and you're going to document all of that, and then with the understanding that if it's a professional interpreter, chances are that they're familiar with the confidentiality issues. In the case of this sheltering in place where you've got all kinds of people that you may not know, you may just need to remind them or have the patient remind them that this is a treatment session and that what happens stays there and isn't to be shared with others outside of that immediate setting.
Great. And as far as consent forms, so we have one person in particular who's emailing the consent forms to parents because that's what they are able to do. And the parents do not have the ability to physically sign, obviously, so they're typing their name in the response or the reply email. Is that sufficient evidence for consent forms?
Again, it sort of depends on where you are and what state you're in, because there's just a lot of different opinions on that. I would strongly suggest going back to your professional organization, APTA, AOTA, ASHA, to get the answers to those questions and what those answers are today, because that does seem to morph as well as we get deeper into this. Sorry to be without specific answers, but unfortunately in my research I found that there's not a lot of real hard and fast specific answers to these questions. So
that can certainly be the case, yeah. And last question is, what is the appropriate response if you notice indicators of physical abuse, substance abuse, or other dangers in the environment that the patient or client is in?
Wow, yeah, we're now getting a direct view into the patient's setting. As healthcare providers, we are mandated reporters, and that should be no different in this situation as it is with any sort of situation as therapists, as teachers, as anybody who's providing services, that you need to report that, and you need to deal with it directly in the same way that you would in any case.
Fantastic. Those are all the questions that we have for you, Joann. Thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you, folks, and thanks for hanging in there over time. I appreciate everybody who did that.
Absolutely. And now we'll turn over to Kathy Alm for some closing remarks.
Thank you, Bret. And I'm gonna start my remarks by just letting everybody know it has been brought to my attention that my laptop has a really loud fan. So if you are hearing a motor running, that is the fan on my laptop, and I apologize. I'll figure something out before next time. So Joann, Meggan, and Stefani, thank you so much for sharing your time and your expertise to help support and strengthen our members. My belief is now and always has been, we're stronger together, and together we will find our way forward. I want to just reiterate, a recording and copy of the PowerPoint and the handouts will be made available to everyone, so that you will be able to take this back and hopefully utilize all sorts of creative ideas that you received today. Thank you for attending.